Is the question all and sundry wishes the solution to it? What is the single biggest killer of relationships inside the contemporary age? Permits communicate about intercourse. Brand new podcast is very, very different, however, distinctly vital. Today I'm sitting down with Kate Moyle, who is a sex therapist and a dating therapist, to speak approximately a number of the taboos topics which we don't normally talk, matters like erectile dysfunction, sexual inadequacies, issues all of us have in our relationships and sex lives, the unmarried biggest killer of relationships in 2021, sexual anxiety, how to preserve a sexual relationship, interesting, and the whole thing in between. I am going to percentage some very private sexual tales that I've by no means shared before, some of the things I've long passed well, and some of the troubles that I've had which have brought on relationships which have supposed the international to me to stop. That is a completely very sincere open podcast these days. You realize this is why this is known as the Diary of a CEO, and Kate is the perfect man or woman to position them to, so I assume you are going to enjoy this communication. I sincerely did. I experience very susceptible sharing some of these testimonies with you. However, as I continually say, just hold it to yourself. So without further ado, this is the Diary of a CEO. I'm hoping nobody's listening. However, if you are, then please hold this to yourself. Intercourse, I suppose it is truthful to say that all and sundry has some type of mission with sex, at least some factor. You realize at the least at some point within their life, and I'm no one of a kind. In fact, my final courting, which become a very I notion, I in reality at one point notion that changed into going to be my wife. The purpose that relationship broke down changed into due to the fact of a sexual trouble and a sexual issue that confirmed up about 7 or 8 months into the connection. And long tale short, I recognize this isn't always a therapy session. However, it sort of is as well. Sooner or later, 7-8 months into our relationship, she advised me that she failed to like having intercourse, and I failed to know what that intended. And as a guy, it has never skilled that in my lifestyles. I study into it probable in the wrong way, but it simply made me insecure. I used to be like, what, you do not like having intercourse? How's that viable? And that I notion that turned into some type of condemnation on me. I thought that changed into something bad in the direction of me, or something that I used to be doing wrong, and that I tried numerous matters. I tried to be a chunk extra beneath you. Understand, pay attention a bit extra to what she desired and how she desired it, and then you comprehend it. Progressively were given to some extent wherein I was moving into bed, and I was myself due to the fact you do not need to. When you get rejected, I've by no means been like, I've in no way long gone to have intercourse with someone in my lifestyles and been rejected in that way, and so that you get in bed, and also you do not want to even ask them for intercourse, because you may take an L and you don't need to take that L, after which how the hell am I meant to get an erection as a guy when I'm that terrified of rejection? And eventually, lengthy tale quick, we're away one time, and the identical problem occurred, and we had been having intercourse, and I used to be looking at her thinking she simply isn't enjoying this in any respect, and we stopped. She started out crying. She said, we're given a trouble. She stated like, you already know I just don't revel in intercourse. I need to love deal with it. I stated to her, you want to talk approximately it. She stated, I am not at ease speaking about intercourse with you, even though we have been in a relationship for a year. And I left, and then I broke up along with her, and that I do remorse breaking up together with her, because I did so maybe too flippantly, and I did not recognize it, and I did not think it changed into fixable, and that I failed to recognize how to restore it. And yes, sorry for my brain, my dumping that on you, however correct vicinity. To begin, no, I think, and so much of what you have just said, there may be such a lot of factors there that you already know. I listen all the time, so problems with preference struggles, with verbal exchange struggles, with understanding like in which to begin in phrases of talking approximately. Attention, you realize all of these points that could type of get within the bedroom with us or be in bed with us, and we simply don't know how we're supposed to cope with them. We don't know what we're intended to do about them, and we all experience that experience of what am I doing incorrect right here, or what's wrong with me? Do I have a problem? Am I broken? You realize all of those phrases, and in reality, working with all the records that you have just given me, for instance, we will kind of target or work with each of those issues in an individual manner, which isn't terrifying for people, which does not create greater tension, which would not harm 6B8, F6984, F70, C7A, C4038, C462A, 50 ECA 3, but we do not have those conversations in a bigger, extra normalizing manner yet, and that, I think, certainly one of the biggest matters that I talk approximately is That this concept that sex, like everything else throughout our lives, has desirable days, terrible days, average days, variability, but we anticipate there to be this constant and we expect it to be included from the whole thing else that we have happening in our lives, and that simply isn't always the case, but an extremely robotically right, like we type of expected to take care of itself, and relationships as properly we kind of assume that once they may be precise, they're always true, that they should not falter, that we should not have to work at them, that they should not conflict, and that I assume that there may be such a hassle with that as a simple foundation message around sex and relationships. How do you chorus that then? How do I reframe my thinking so that you can make positive that I might bet that is a reframing of my wondering if I suppose that this issue isn't going to attend to itself and it needs to be worked on like the whole thing else in my existence. I bet it really is the solution to maintaining it interesting. I suggest I suppose there is only a normalizing of the truth that our sex lives and our relationships are inside the context of us. They may be no longer isolated, they're no longer covered, they do not have their very own type of unique area where they are not impacted via how we experience about ourselves, pressure, anxiety, our health, our mental fitness. You recognize physically what is occurring for us, psychologically what's taking place for us, but why do not we just deliver ourselves a wreck? But you know what, we're no longer perfect or excellent or exquisite at the whole lot else we do all the time, so why might we be right here? I do not think, I suppose as professionals we often talk about like why are not we applying the logic that we practice anywhere else in our lives to this part of our lives, and in that precise case with me and my this precise man or woman, she turned to me, I consider we had been away one time, and she or he stated to me, you already know there's hundreds of people that are like me that do not have like excessive libido or something, and I have just by no means encountered those people in my reports, so I concept, oh, this is garbage, changed into she proper, sure, yes, and how right is she, very proper. And you already know, we understand that you recognize that is a large part of the communique around intercourse lives in the meantime, and sexual well-being for the time being is this concept approximately desire preference is no longer a fixed idea that we're born with, we are now not form of given or maintaining a hard and fast amount. It is no longer like we type of have in quantity and we adore, use it up, it is context established, it is responsive, and we remember the fact that it changes, however, definitely how we are able to exchange that inside, sort of take electricity of our personal, I suppose, or change that within the context that we are in. How we will feel in control of that is based in nearly how we define it or how we apprehend it ourselves, and there is a massive hassle. We're simply wondering, okay, nicely I had it, now I do not have it in the equal manner anymore, so what is incorrect with me, or what is damaged, or what modified, or what's now not working right here, rather than if I reframe my know-how, my thinking about this, it makes a lot greater experience and it takes the stress off, and whilst the pressure's off, then I'm able to work with this in a greater pride-centered fun way in place of an anxiety-provoking and stressful manner. What need to have completed. So the first time she turns to me, she says, Steve, I am just no longer that interested, because what it became is we're in bed and we are away on a holiday, and I love you, no, simply I do not know what I do, anything I do to allow a person realize that when I have sex I do not no stroke their arm or something, I did something I do. And she was just like, nah, and what must I've accomplished then? Because I assume lots of humans could take that as a bit of an L, and that I absolutely did. I was like what I was, and I used to be indignant as nicely, no longer like visibly angry, no longer like you already know hitting with a pillow or something. However, I became, I don't forget turning away and questioning. You realize, because I would in no way skilled that earlier than I've in no way skilled that it is a form of rejection. It is like a shape of, it is a kick in the 6B8 F6984 F70 C7A C40 38 C46 2A50 ECA3. What need to I have achieved? Well, I assume you realize I cannot speak to what become occurring for you like form of in that moment then, but you realize the largest hassle that couples in situations like that have is assumption. So as you said, this is the kick inside the teeth for me, that hurts, I sense rejected, so we internalize, and in fact, the exceptional way for us to address something like that is to try to give an explanation for, to attempt to flow far from assumption to rationalization, to know how due to the fact, absolutely, if we are able to have a communique which opens up, and you already know, will you listen intercourse next. Courting experts speak about verbal exchange being, you recognize the type of largest pillar of sexual well-being or sexual properly being, an assumption type of, and the distance among expectancies and reality is truly the largest vicinity that we have a lot of these issues. And I suppose that it seems like that's a very good instance of that going on rapid forward 4 months. The same form of trouble befell, and he or she grew to become to me, and that is once I thought it became completely over, is she stated to me, I am no longer at ease with speak me to. You approximately intercourse right, and we have been together for a year, and that I idea properly. If we cannot talk about it and I don't genuinely apprehend the difficulty and you are no longer inclined to speak approximately it, then we are, and that I thought, and it really is when I left that USA quickly after, and I broke up together with her. Perhaps like I do not recognize 3 weeks later, because I idea if we cannot communicate approximately it, then how can we restore the situation? But I do regret it due to the fact I suppose I mirror, and I think I do not want to be the type of man usually that when they care about someone will stroll away from it so without problems, and I assume I ought to have made a greater, energetic attempt to try to aid as you assert and apprehend, maybe, but I would say now and again the toughest individual to speak to approximately intercourse is the person we're having it with. Yeah, due to it's so loaded, it is so like intimate, it's so prone, and also the worry of having it wrong or making it worse or main our companions on or stepping into the wrong route or us not being able to unhear what we have heard or unsay what we've got stated. So genuinely you recognize that natural human reaction to feeling tension round something is avoidance. You realize we do not generally tend to technique the assets of our tension unless we are attempting truly hard to hone in on it or consciousness on it. Our maximum natural intuition is I don't want to move there, like it is just easier to preserve the popularity quo, although that popularity quo isn't running, and so it's about thinking about how do we assist people to method that source of anxiety or feel empowered to change their verbal exchange around sex due to the fact it is actually hard. It is like talking in a language that we've not been taught. You already know we're no longer taught a way to have those conversations. We are not taught to be cozy about those conversations. We are now not taught that sex is normalized as a topic, and then we're anticipated to all be experts and that our partners are going to be experts, and we're all waiting for that from each other. And then when it would not work, you realize we have no answers or ways of knowing a way to cope with it. Now, a number of us litter via we type of work it out. We're like, okay, well, let's do this or reflect on consideration on this or take professional recommendation or pay attention to a podcast or study a e-book or get the information, and we will sort of work our way through it. But for loads of us, it's manner too intimidating. Sex feels like an off the record, you realize off the desk topic. How do you bring forth the table? How do, and I'm presuming that couples which are a hit inside the bedroom are those who bring it on the table to some degree. Is that a truthful assumption? Or yeah, I think it truly is certainly a fair assumption. I suppose that you understand it takes the braveness to do it. It takes the type of sitting within the uncomfortable. It is probably pretty tension breaking. Obviously some people sort of seek out therapy or outside recommendation or a person that can assist them control the one's conversations, or they could do it of their very own manner. So it might be kind of reading an ebook and sharing that with each different, or taking note of a TED speak and then sharing that with each different, and the usage of that as a springboard to have that verbal exchange. But I would say it's speaking approximately at outdoor of the bedroom is the largest manner to place it at the desk. And is it viable to be similar to sexually incompatible with someone? Yeah, I suppose it's far and the way it's supposed not possible viable to be incompatible with anything else. However, what we can also do is, while we've got distinct pastimes or special alternatives in different regions of our lives, we will paintings collectively to barter that, to control that, to sort of work to each different form of possibilities, or and kind of switch that round or manage that form of relational bit, that type of bit in between. And it's miles viable to try this with sex, but also for some people they may have deal breakers and that they won't be capable of meet those for each other. This is, I do not know if this is an excessive amount of records, but I do not suppose I care. I recollect in the future as properly I tried to introduce, because I commonly after I have sex I generally use plenty of additional equipment, so I will use all styles of stuff. I don't care, like I'll use handcuffs and all types of ropes and toys and anything else, and I recall looking to introduce something like that. Due to the fact idea, maybe it would make it a little bit greater thrilling for her, and she turned into like definitely no longer she stated to me that she thought I think it become a vibrator. She concept of vibrator changed into for antique humans, and you recognize I am already up. I am in reality up towards it. Here it really is. So I am attempting to like do something to help, and while she stated that I just idea like maybe we are just like sexually incompatible, perhaps just We simply communicate two exclusive languages right here, so I do not know, but you already know, like on occasion one element, Nina, what I'd say is it is absolutely extra common for couples to not be perfectly sexually matched, yeah. Then it's far for them to be like flawlessly sexually matched in each manner, and for a few humans they're greater geared up to try something, or they is probably the one that leads something after which the opposite associate form of catches up, or it's absolutely and approximately also sort of like how we perceive what our accomplice is suggesting, or what we assume meaning, because one of the things about intercourse is we've this concept as humans approximately like metacognition, like we consider our thoughts, we think about what that our thoughts mean, and I suppose it is without a doubt genuinely obvious while it involves sex and relationships, because we're seeking to constantly examine what's occurring, or as you said, form of searching out for Jew. Like the hazard of rejection or the fear of rejection, we're seeking to understand which means approximately us, or what that way about them, or what it means about our courting. And so we are always seeking to, I suppose, think about like what's happening in the wider context or meaning of that. Now, in terms of intercourse, we're already in a subculture and a society in which it's a bit taboo, in which it is quite stigmatized, in which we don't necessarily want to kind of step out of doors, the norms or the expectations, because what does that mean about us as someone you understand on the grounds that complete occasion we spoke a bit when we broke up, and she advised me that was virtually the primary time she instructed me that she had like a low libido, and that I surely did not honestly apprehend what that intended, so I Googled it, but then I started speak me to a few buddies about it, particularly some male buddies, and I had another male buddy say to me, one among my high-quality buddies said to me that he also had the same trouble, wherein he simply lost his sexual desire, while he got to a sure age, which I was greatly surprised, approximately due to the fact people do not have these conversations, so you don't assume it takes place. So when we come across it, whether or not it's in the bedroom or wherever else, it certainly looks like a real anomaly. However, how commonplace is low libido, and also what are the standard causes of a person having a low libido? I think simply common, and that I think you understand, like so much of the stuff we don't have large quantities of, at least up to date, like intercourse studies. So you recognize it is something that human beings are actually trying to type of expand within the space. However, what we understand whilst we think approximately preference, so we've got preference, and we're given arousal, so arousal, the frames bodily capacity to form of prepare for sex, the desire, the want to be sexual, and what we recognize is that it typically adjustments throughout relationships, and what feels truly tough about it is that on the start of relationships, whilst the whole lot is new and thrilling, we are gaining knowledge of each different, we're exploring, it feels like choice is very excessive, we're type of leaning into that as it's a manner of studying each different, a way of connecting with that individual, and it's sort of what we recognize is it's precipitated, I suppose, a lot due to the fact numerous the conditions we discover ourselves in our novel, our type of tuning into additionally the place of our brain that likes the brand new matters, that likes the excitement, and we've got that sense of wanting to get toward that character, trying to get to recognize them. Now additionally, what we see specifically that is with a dating consciousness is there is like alternate a form of like novelty new, for like habitual safety protection, getting to understand someone. So we sort of see those things switching out nearly, and so it is simply truly that as we get kind of extra used to each different, there are less of these form of triggering, like exciting moments, which are where preference can generally tend to thrive, and what we need to do is possibly just barely greater consciously, or with a piece more of an attempt put in the time to create those areas. Now Chuck and I suggest you already know the 12 months we've located ourselves in, where no one's had any type of personal area or independence or capacity to go away and come back collectively, kind of alternative context, but generation, the form of well 033, and fourth, if there's two humans in the dating wheels which are constantly taking our attention, kind of annoying us, distracting us, so we're lacking indicators from our companions, we are lacking those type of, I think, nice time moments, we're constantly notified, or we are distracted, and in reality then it is more difficult for us to present every different our complete attention, to sort of sit down in cognizance on every other, to have the matters, that cell connection, eye contact, touch, we're constantly kind of looking round and connecting, I assume, with anybody other than the character, really, that where it creates a barrier. And so how do you understand you get 5, 10, 15, 20 years into dating, and you have began to get, relaxed and matters are predictable. How do you, this might be the maximum. You realize popular question I'm certain you get, which is like, how do you keep it fresh? What recommendation could you provide me to hold my sex life with an associate I've been with for X amount of years, nonetheless clean, exciting, and yeah, exploratory. Yeah, I think I imply it is the query anyone wants the solution proper. It is its miles about as first thing acknowledging that it might be one of a kind to how it was so once. More certainly one of the biggest hurdles people can get form of tripped over on is it's no longer the same as it was once, or it changed now. Why does that imply it's worse actually? Perhaps the high quality of the sex that human beings is probably having might be higher due to the fact they understand every other better, they apprehend every difference bodies higher, they sense greater in song with each other, so it's knowledge which you might be in an exclusive segment or degree, and that is okay, it would not have to be, that well-known phrase, the honeymoon duration, that form of anyone prices or is going again to. So I think that is one thing, and that I suppose surely sort of carving out the time and the gap and the attempt, and not due to the fact as a terrible element, not considering that as complex, that we should be a bit greater conscious of that part of our relationships, is a large, massive thing, because what the kind of common narrative we see in like society, I assume, is if I should take the time for this, then there need to be something incorrect with that, because intercourse should be spontaneous, have to be something that just came about. That's what it says inside the films, which is a part of the trouble proper, because it is one of the most effortlessly reachable, visible versions of sex that we've got. We don't see into other humans as intercourse lives inside the identical manner. Now what we do see is social media or snapshots of couples or pictures of couples, and we make assumptions approximately them. We make assumptions about the appearance glad, but they've wonderful sex. Yeah, and porn, it is much like the gardeners, like outside, after which Eli comes in and the husband's away, and then like it is just increased best lasts an hour. Every person seems like they may be having a fantastic time. However, one of the nice phrases that I heard and you recognize is making an attempt to learn about sex from porn is like getting to know to drive from watching The Fast and the Furious, and it's one of the things that I am going lower back to. I knew you said it, and if you realize, please tell me so that you can declare it. However, porn wasn't designed as an educational tool, but loads of humans have used it as one, and that is, again, I imply, like each man ever, and also women, to be fair, like I suppose men have this bias, where we suppose ladies do not watch porn, but then you definitely ask a girl you understand. And I've asked numerous of my ex-girlfriends if they've watched porn, and oh yeah, they do. A number of them do, but I would say, and that is a widespread, and I would love you to correct me here due to the fact I'd love to now not be. I really like to be corrected on things like this, where I am so naive. I generally tend to trust that like 90 of my male pals watch porn, after which I assume it is probably like 50 of my female buddies. Do you recognize the numbers? Is that I do not understand the numbers. However, we know that ladies watch porn. We recognize that there also are a large upward thrust of like lady pleasant female targeted pornography platforms type of coming ahead. And I suppose that a whole lot of those thoughts again tie into these old stereotypes and narratives, approximately like male sexuality and lady sexuality. And then you definitely know we are seeking to trade the conversation around this. And I think that it is also approximately recognizing that they're now not those kind of like two like so separate entities, and in fact that we will recognize that we're all sexual creatures and we all have our own variations of sexuality. And what that doesn't mean is that it has to once more sort of line up with the narratives which have always been there, that's like men do this, girls try this, but are there differences between sexual appetite and the form of illustration of sex that males and females typically want to look? I changed into going to invite you a question which form of alludes to the equal answer, but it is like if you have been to create a point due to the fact you stated there may be guys there, maybe now sites rising that are like girl pleasant. I'm like, what is the difference? What is, how do they, I think nicely, one of the things that a lot of these websites, they may be growing is a focus on kind of woman satisfaction in a way. That's that what we recognize, for example, is that most of the people of women, or like the most commonplace manner of bringing girls to orgasm is through direct, literal stimulation, but for example, and no longer always porn. However, inside the films we in no way see that, and so then everybody is form of replicating what they see within the movies, and no surprise it is now not quite operating. So I assume that there may be additionally academic factors starting to sort of come forward, and plenty of that type of content as nicely, I wager, that makes experience. If the demand for pornography has been skewed male, then what you're seeing in the pornography would additionally be catered to what a male loves. To trust is you understand men as you want alluded to, that men commonly get their arousal from like what do they name it vaginal penetration. I wager it is now not sex. Yeah, or intercourse something, but ladies could commonly get reach like an orgasm via clitoral stimulation. So porn has a tendency to reflect to the former. So has porn been a high quality or poor effect on our perceptions and photographs of what our own sexual relationship ought to be like? Do you watch? Oh, it really is this kind of massive query. Is it once more? It is the one that everybody desires to understand the solution to. I suppose that the hassle that we have seen is whilst humans have used it as an academic aid, and that is now not the way it became designed. Now what it has offered is individuals who are exploring their sexuality and sense that it doesn't healthy for instance the norm or predicted norm. You understand however you want, whatever terminology you want to apply for that. It's supplied those human beings a sense of community or safety in exploring or belonging or knowing that they may be no longer on my own, not remote in their experience. And so there are you recognize like the entirety in existence. There may be going to be big execs and cons and prefer anything in lifestyles is how human beings use anything, but I assume for me you already know running with human beings with sexual troubles and relationship problems, isolation or feeling on my own for your enjoy might be the largest facet effect or negative facet effect on mental health or on the problem itself of what they may be experiencing, of what they may be suffering with, and so combating that, which in a way is where therapy facilitates. You already know we are type of sharing that conversation. We know that disgrace prospers in silence. We are beginning to externalize. We're beginning to talk approximately these items as making human sense. They're no longer on my own is huge. I am one of the things you stated I study that you had said before, which I concept become definitely right recommendation, especially because it pertains to retaining sex like fresh and thrilling becomes simply to change one element whenever and I wanted to for you to inform me why you watch this is essential and how that helps. It goes again to a number of the themes you have pointed out. However, it changed into one of the things that I ought to right away do in my personal sex existence to hold things constantly clean. Yeah, and what are those small things which you're referring to when you say I assume what I love approximately this is it's actionable. So it is this concept that we are able to all be like empowered and in control to do something in our intercourse lives, and you realize like one of the phrases we listen sort of all the time is that mixing it up, spicing it up, and what I suppose human beings get intimidated by is the idea that they've to do something large to do that they should, go out like buy an entire new cloth wardrobe, yeah, precisely, or try something that they've like never accomplished earlier than, or you already know, purchase 25 intercourse memories, or you already know. Attempt everything, like, and that in itself then turns into a barrier to humans trying it because they're like, oh God, that sounds scary. Costly is nicely, however you understand like that it is, that God, like how am I going to do that? There is no stepping stone to that. It's a whole like bridge, an entire leap, and that puts people off. So again, we are back to that avoidance aspect. You realize what I will simply stay in my safe sector. I'll live in my comfort region. I will stay wherein I am. Like the idea of attempting that and it not operating or trying that and it failing feels manner scarier than in which we are at proper now. And so I think that idea of like changing one element each time it is also that habitual does not kind of assist or sell or kind of inspire desire, because we are like, oh, I recognize what is coming. I know how this is going to go, and what we are then doing is we're more likely to form of let our thoughts wander or be distracted. And we see that with human beings, you already know they are like, I comprehend it's going to move. So certainly I wasn't actually noticing what became taking place in my body or that experience I was thinking about, like the entirety I need to do the following day. And so what it does is it works as a way of encouraging breaking up ordinary. Now these are small matters like having the lighting on or having the lights off, starting together with your garments on or your garments off, keeping your undies on or undies off, using lube, or now not, you understand, taking sex off the desk for that night and just that specialize in non-penetrative sex, attempting a sex toy, or you understand placing even something simple that I communicate about is placing like your pillows on the opposite give up of your mattress so your room feels one-eo vacant, like lights, candles, changing your scent, having a shower, or now not doing it in the road. You may get arrested for that. However, you comprehend it's that concept of those are all accessible inside range, non-intimidating things that we can try to create shifts and changes. My journey with Huel has intensified lots over the past 6 to 1 year. The untold story of a healthy weight reduction plan and a nutritionally entire food regimen is the way you feel, and honestly it really is a far extra vital thing, because definitely the way you experience is the kind of precursor to you having the incentive, the discipline, and the country of mind that will help you go to the health club and follow through for your dreams. And that I feel first rate. I don't suppose I've ever felt better. I've in no way had extra strength. I've been sound asleep amazingly well. My sort of intellectual cognition has been sharper than it ever has earlier than, but I simply feel suitable, right? And also you frequently just get to look the physical effects that having a nutritionally whole weight loss program should have, but there are all of those other impacts and different effects that are so much extra important, and as I said, are the precursor to the tremendous bodily results you see. So yeah, you realize it's one factor having a podcast sponsor that will pay you money. However, it's every other component having a podcast sponsor who you in reality accept as true with can assist human beings change their lives for the better. Is it feasible for some you understand due to the fact we're given this one buddy, and I'm sorry for simply rinse one and all my buddies here. We're given this one buddy. Yeah, this is a problem with being pals with me. You continually seem inside the podcast in case you were given any moderate peculiarity about you and prefer. I feel like all of my friends have been noted in this podcast at least once. They simply don't know wherein they're being noted. However, I have got this one buddy who is a guy, and I have known him maybe 10 years, and I don't assume he's ever had sex, and he's perhaps 27, 28 years old something, and that I do not agree with he has ever had intercourse. I have in no way. I have never seen him in a dating. He would not talk to ladies at all, or guys for that count, and that I do not. It is simply so uncommon, because in our friendship group we speak about intercourse loads. So we're always speaking about, you understand, who we're drowsing with in numerous things, and we've basically simply found out now not have the communication with him or while he's there. You understand, if we're similar to joking with every different as pals, we are able to in no way funny story with him, because it's just this large query mark and none of us understand the answer, and that I suppose my end has been maybe he is simply asexual. If it truly is the thing, yeah, it really is the issue. And what is that issue, and if I'm certain you have heard about this before proper, what's happening? Properly, I imply we don't know what's going on for that person, but you already know asexuality is an identification you recognize, like people who don't experience sexual enchantment, and what that also does not mean. So we have asexuality and aromanticism, so those are two exclusive concepts. So what we are able to see is that humans could have a hit relationships and be asexual, because they could have connection and friendship and intimacy, and we can see that people who so we will keep in mind that it is now not a type of pairing necessarily, and something I also speak approximately is we will have intimacy without intercourse, and intercourse without intimacy. Now, what a collection that I have also labored with is lots of people who've such awful sexual tension, and this is in no manner me saying what's going on for your buddy, but that limits them in sexually exploring or taking their sex lifestyles to where they want to move, or dating, or seeing people due to the fact what it may sense a peace like is if we get at the latter of, for instance, meeting someone or courting, then we get closer in the direction of the supply of our anxiety, which might be sex. And that I think that folks that have not had sexual reports, and I assume undergoing thoughts, you are most effective viewing this from your perspective instead of talking to the individual you have been talking to, is that kind of, it could feel like a snowball impact of a something that I communicate a lot about in therapy with people, that I am running with this snowball effect of, okay, well, the older I get, the greater I experience that this is a worry, or the more I sense other people will judge me, or the greater I feel that I might not healthy as much as what is predicted of me, or that I can get sort of determined out. And I suppose that those anxieties around intercourse also are because what we anticipate is sexuality in human being, so we form of expect everyone's sexually energetic. It is going return to that factor approximately feeling isolated or by myself in our revel, and everybody else is doing it. So what is incorrect with me, and that the hassle we've got while it comes to intercourse is we can't recognize with human beings till we test it out. We cannot know till we were judging someone's inside global primarily based on what we see from the out of doors, and In fact, what we know with sex is that they do not always in shape up. There may be no way of truly knowing until we, for instance, take a seat down with a therapist and unpack it, or sit down with a chum or a member of the family or whoever that is we percentage accomplish that conversation with. I suppose there's also I used to be simply wondering then about there is also this wider philosophical query of what is the reason of sex? Because if you see intercourse as being no, simply to ejaculate, then you definitely realize you might stumble upon a bunch of troubles there, because the position that sex is gambling for your companion might be a completely exceptional one. So I bet at the start you have to apprehend what position intercourse performs in relationships to your partner. However, also to yourself, is that how could you outline the purpose or the function of sex? What's it? Why do we do it? And what is it for we're going to make a sexual therapist have you? But are we having my activity in a minute? I understand you may see day after today Instagram page. It is like intercourse with Steve. It is simply everything you have said. So one among my favorite portions of research, and absolutely everyone who has listened to my podcast or any of the interviews and stuff I recognize is going to be so bored of hearing me bang on about that, is a paper known as Why People Have Sex, and it become done in 2007, and it recognized 237 reasons for why people, the motivations for why humans have sex, and there is any such wide breadth of those, and that might be, my favorite one from that take a look at is due to the fact I was cold, due to the fact I wanted to get warm. However, we can remember the fact that, it might be because I want an orgasm, due to the fact my associate appeared warm, due to the fact I desired to experience close to them, due to the fact I desired to show them I cherish them, due to the fact, because due to the fact, so the which means of intercourse goes be so beyond the what of what we are doing. However, we're so focused at the what all of the time, and then we get so snarled in everything it is type of psychologically going on for us. And I suppose that you recognize every now and then we are considering the why. You understand what does it constitute in our courting. If we're in a courting, what does it represent to us? If we are single, what does it constitute to us? If truly the sexual dating we have is simply with ourselves, you already know, I think that considering this is this kind of large component of us information ourselves sexually, there's in reality emotional elements. However, there is also a physical, prehistoric, maybe evolutionary position that intercourse plays, right? And has that been truly lost upon us? Now, due to the fact my frame, my body, you understand the chemical substances in my frame will begin tickling me and telling me that I am attractive, and then you definitely know a good way to drive me into movement. You understand. I feel just like the position, the type of prehistoric evolutionary role of intercourse has been lost upon us a touch bit in particular now, which you recognize we have all this birth control and we are able to swerve having kids. So I think it's grow to be a piece of a sport for lots of humans. Well, intercourse is set pleasure is not it. Did you already know? You tell me. Well, you understand. I assume properly what we see is that most of the people, of the motives that people have sex are not to do with procreation. Yeah, and also that the hassle is, I suppose, something you type of said earlier, changed into it, is so gold it can be so intention orientated now again. This is in which such a lot of humans struggle with sex due to the fact if intercourse is goal-orientated, and as you said, just like the aim is to orgasm or to ejaculate or to finish, then what happens if that doesn't happen? We experience like we have failed, yeah. And so what it creates then is that this intention-oriented sort of bypass or fail model for intercourse. Now, the whole irony of that is if we're suffering and we're centered on in which we want to get to as an intention, the act of specializing in where we need to get to is truly the element this is most likely to not get us there, because it's preventative due to the fact if we're in the moment enjoying what we are doing, experiencing sort of pride and sensations and able to enjoy it, then this is certainly the aspect it's probably most possibly to get us there. However, if we're so distracted by means of the bad thoughts which can be going on in our heads, we're so distracted by way of our concerns, our worries, that is going to interrupt down that sort of technique folks getting there. Because I recognize a number of humans, most effective, each sentence I say sounds so abnormal, I think I recognize plenty of humans that warfare with orgasms, but I recognize I've spoken to some of my girlfriends and I've asked them in the event that they've orgasmed. In fact, my one in every of my ex-girlfriends, she stated to me that she had essentially in no way had an orgasm in her lifestyles, which I manifestly as a guy you locate pretty well nicely, no longer glaringly, but as a man that has in no way had that trouble. I found that pretty bizarre, and I questioned why a few human beings can orgasm so without difficulty, and then some humans are discover it loads extra hard. On this unique case, my suspicions were that it become an emotional thing. In reality, what you've got just defined there approximately worry that is one of the people that I know. It truly is very, very hectic about the subject of intercourse, and I simply notion you already know my suspicion, again super naive, become that they may be not understanding this individual. They could probably not be able to relax in bed, after which when after they became a sexual accomplice of mine, idea, they're just like no longer relaxed in any respect. However, I wanted to get your tackle why some humans discover it so smooth to orgasm, and then a few humans just cannot in any respect nicely. I suppose it also goes return to almost just like the first time, early messages about these things as nicely. You understand early messages approximately what it's want to have these experiences, what it's want to be sexual. Is it something? It's by no means been pointed out. Is it something? It's shrouded in disgrace. Is it something that we think that we shouldn't be doing, or we consider ourselves a sure way for doing? And so there may be such a lot of components to this as a conversation, and you understand, in all likelihood, too many you recognize longer than we've got time for, but there is the idea of the way we again think about what we're doing, how we understand and study our bodies, what we understand and find out about our bodies, how we find out what works for us and our preferences. So there is the bodily element you recognize. We talk about an orgasm as a height delight experience, however, also how we feel approximately it, because if we're feeling disgrace or embarrassment, or that we shouldn't be doing this, that is going to be something which again receives in the way of us being capable of absolutely let cross and revel in ourselves, or giving ourselves in remedy. We speak lots approximately this idea of giving ourselves permission to be sexual, or to permit cross, or to enjoy ourselves, or to enjoy pride. Again, that is excellent naive. However, an orgasm is a quite natural component, isn't always it. It is like a herbal physiological reaction to stimulation. So once more, exceptional naive. Just I will simply disclaimer from here on out that the whole thing I say is largely naive, and I will stop disclaimering each sentence. But so one would anticipate that if you recognize if we are suffering to orgasm, then there may be something perhaps emotional, perhaps even bodily, that's being going unmet. There might be something bodily going on, but it's there may be in all likelihood like something emotional occurring. However, it's also about you recognize, have we learned to do this? Like, have we learned to kind of revel in pride enough to take us there? And also, as soon as we do, then we are like, okay, I apprehend how my body works now. I recognize how that feels. And I assume for plenty the dearth of sex education right here is a massive a part of the hassle. You recognize pleasure has traditionally been ignored of the conversation, and in particular girl pleasure. Who are your customers? Who involves you with the sex issue? Humans with normal issues. You recognize everyday human beings for each different some genders. You already know both women and men. I paintings with each couples and individuals. I have quite a few more youthful clients, so a lot of my clients are kind of in that sub 45 age bracket, but I paintings with lots of people of their sort of early 20s, and I suppose that the early 20s type of 30s. But additionally, there's a couple of things which can be taking place. One is that therapy has come to be plenty much less taboo in itself, and sex plenty much less taboo, and we have this sort of corner of remedy that is psychosexual remedy, in which I suppose people apprehend that it now may be an answer, or that sexual troubles are not simply clinical, that truly there can be something psychological or emotional happening. And I assume that the idea of having access to assist for these items now has grown to be much extra normalized. That is top notch, I think you understand, and plenty needed. And there are some incredible, brilliant sexual professionals and sexual therapists in this United States who I'm hoping are truly being, and I realize have absolutely been used by people to help them improve this, a part of their lives, and that I assume that again, a part of its miles, some other component of our lifestyles, we would pass and see a health practitioner or cross and spot a physio, or pass and notice a nutritionist or whatever it is. If a part of our frame wasn't working, we'd access help for it without feeling embarrassed. If we would injured our knee, we would not sense embarrassed approximately going to invite someone about that. However, why, while it comes to intercourse, do we feel that we should not get entry to the assist? And then the longer we are struggling with that, the greater of a trouble that will become, because we do not just have the original problem, however, how we suppose and experience approximately it. However, is there like an age range where human beings are more likely to go into a sexual therapist? No, I don't assume there may be then, I suppose, evenly distributed from like 20 to 80. Yeah, clearly, I mean, and I think you already know again, it is a piece approximately life levels is not that you recognize what are human beings seeking to discover. At distinct ranges we see, for example, human beings might go after a most cancer's diagnosis or cancer remedy, or as an instance, around menopause, or that there are certain fitness situations that affect sexuality, or you already know not unusual side impact of plenty of anti-anxiety medicinal drugs and antidepressants are an impact on sex lives, or it might be that someone is beginning their sexual reviews, or they've had a relationship where an intercourse has been a hassle and they do not need to carry that on into their next courting. I suppose that it's approximately knowledge like what has brought that man or woman to therapy at therapist besides form of exploring what's taking place for that man or woman. What is the trigger for managing it now? Polygamy. Do you have a variety of human beings come to you within polygamous relationships, so that you imply like polyamory, like multi-component, multi-part relationships? And what are the troubles typically that you would see with polyamorous polygamous relationships? I think that it's something that human beings have a number of questions about. It's thing which you understand I have mentioned on my podcast because it's what humans are curious approximately due to the fact it is also a breaking away from our type of heteronormative, like mononormative model of relationships. And I think the large questions that humans have are, how can we do this? The way do we navigate this? How will we manage it? And that is about operating out what the rules are for the ones human beings you realize. How do they hold? What are the policies for them that work for them? How do they recognize the guidelines? You recognize rules around such things as disclosure policies around such things as how much detail will we move into? How can we manipulate this? However, absolutely communicate for plenty of the one's relationships is in reality correct due to the fact they should be truly correct, so that you can manipulate that one of a kind fashion of being, or you already know additionally simply the practicalities of there being more than two companions in a courting. I have constantly puzzled if it might reason a lot greater issues. However, I wager you've got answered it there. It's about analyzing, selling clean rules, and having effective communication. My subsequent question once more, which I used to be absolutely excited to invite you, was like, what is and this is an extraordinary tough question, so simply get ready. What are the things that men do not and normally don't apprehend about ladies in relation to intercourse and vice versa? It is a tough query, isn't always it? It is a difficult query. I was just questioning. I used to be wondering because I recognize men are superb naive, and we are exposed to a positive form of media and content material after which we adore, rush into the bedroom thinking that I don't know our companions need to be, tied up or ruled or whatever else. And then from the opposite attitude, you recognize whilst you talk to a female about sex and what she's looking for, there is manifestly she's experienced a certain sort of media. However, she is also, I think, usually again with being exquisite binary here, commonly a lady has a slightly extraordinary expectation from the man. From my reviews anyway, I assume a part of the trouble in this is that binary technique is if there's something that I might want each person to recognize, it's that we can be extraordinary, but we also are so comparable. You already know and likelihood, like what's one of the biggest things I want anyone to think about is the assumptions. You understand what are the assumptions that we're making approximately each other based on gender norms and expectancies, primarily based on ancient messages. How do we ruin far from them? And it is probably that is a verbal exchange among the ones two people, and that's the best manner of doing it. However, also you realize all of those so a lot of those thoughts approximately intercourse is so steeped in records. However, we've in no way asked them, we've in no way had them challenged. So an assumption being you already know a surely historical message that we pay attention all the time means something I hear all of the time whilst I am talking to people approximately like myths. You understand what are the sexual myths or what are the sexual guidelines which you suppose are type of relevant for your intercourse life. In reality, commonplace one is that men initiate sex, like men are the initiators, the intercourse, and women are the responders. Now, how does that fit humans then when they may be like, oh, but this is not the way it works for us, or, as an example, male partner, if we're talking about heterosexual relationships, who is much less confident, and a girl partner who is greater confident. And so sincerely it's the opposite manner round, but then they're wondering but this is not what we think anybody else is doing. So perhaps there is a problem here whilst there is not, due to the fact that's what's operating for them, and also you see big distinctions among the problems that heterosexual and gay relationships have. I assume that what equal intercourse relationships don't battle with as a great deal is the gender assumptions, the gender narratives, the gender norms, that kind of concept of like guys do that and girls do that, but you recognize there also are sort of every dating struggles in some manner with that dynamic of we are two individuals, how do we paintings on our differences and our similarities together, that interrelational component, that is what happens between us, the way, what are our triggers, how do we form of what makes us each annoying, or what makes us each experience comfy, or what makes us each feel nearer, and additionally navigating that you recognize that that's simply the conflict that every one couples have once more high-quality, naive question. But I am certain it is one of the most famous questions you get requested, that is like, is there a healthful quantity of instances for a couple to have intercourse per week or something? I used Fiverr once a month earlier than they became a sponsor on this podcast, and on account that they have grown to be a sponsor on this podcast, and I have delved into what the website does and how all the services work and the massive array of factors that you could gain on Fiverr, the usage of freelancers around the world. Can't see, I swear in his life, that I've used Fiverr as a minimum as soon as a week for the last 3 months. We have built so many websites, we've designed such a lot of decks, we have had movies edited, we have had subtitles produced. If you have not looked at Fiverr earlier, then hit the hyperlink within the bio, Fiverr.com CEO, visit the website, test it out, and every single time I do this podcast, one person who DMS me with a carrier from Fiverr that they want doing for their enterprise, for his or her podcast, for something undertaking they're working on, I will pay for that service to be finished for you. So discover a service on Fiverr that you need executed, send me a message, and one character each week can have that carrier paid for via me. Exquisite naive question, but I am certain it's one of the most famous questions you get asked. That's like, is there a healthy amount of instances for a couple to have sex consistent with week or anything? And you already know one could count on that modifications over time proper, because I realize just judging by using my relationships, it starts, we begin like energize the bunny rabbits, and you then realize life takes place, but is there, you understand, and that I hate those questions due to the fact, once more, they're so like unnuanced and so like narrow. However, is there a mean amount of times that couples you realize if you needed to solution this query and not swerve it in this for the sake of nuance, what would the solution be? I would like to know what you think the solution is. I assume, again, context, like I'm going to go into nuances right here, but context subjects, like if you stay on contrary sides of the world, then obviously there's obstacles, but if you're living within the same house, if you're cohabiting, dwelling inside the identical residence, I think like at least 2 times every week, you realize once within the weekend, Tuesday, however, where queso, in which do you think that idea of 2 times per week would comes from simply looking at my agenda. Wait a minute, in which can I locate time? In all likelihood, like once in the week, after which on the weekends I have a piece greater time. So however, it manifestly adjustments through the years. I sense like I in all likelihood have sex every night time, but if you understand, however, simply electricity stages. And what is the solution then? So someone I interviewed talked about the amount of intercourse we've got as a red herring, so the form of regularity of intercourse doesn't determine like the delight of it or the kind of pride of it or the leisure of it, and that I suppose what it appears like we've been seeking to do is find a goal manner of measuring sex. So it is this idea of, okay, nicely, we are all searching for the solution to sex, like the way to be accurate at intercourse, like what that seems like, how to understand, in which we pitch ourselves against everyone else in regularity, is one of the best type of goal measures we have of that. So it is the one that we will lean into, or we want to know the solution to. Whereas what I would say is I do not think we do have an idea of, I don't know what form of cutting edge, like surveys say there may be a huge survey. It is achieved in form of every few years, but I have not clearly seen the results of that one, but what approximately the monkeys, how often are they doing? I experienced like, they were like, what are the orangutans doing? I have not were given a clue to find out perhaps your next visitor, like a zoologist or something, but I assume that the component is running out again, and what we're looking for is a measure of like how we are doing via knowing that solution. And I think one of the matters is for some couples it might B, as you stated, they may type of work in one of a kind. Nations, it is probably on every occasion they see every different they've excellent intercourse, and that is sufficient, like that works for them. For different couples it is probably we've intercoursed as soon as a month, and it's truly desirable. You recognize we are each taking part in ourselves, and we experience like our desires are met first rate. For other humans it might be as soon as a week. You realize, I assume it is about figuring out like what your normal is or what your what's proper for you. However, again, the sort of issues and anxieties and stresses come from a we are now not having sufficient sex. Why is that? Yeah, you recognize, is it because my associate's no longer drawn to me? That has a tendency to be the first element people go to. And what is going on? Is it because our courting isn't always running? Is it while we do not have a clear form of apparent solution, like we've just had an infant as an instance? So there is the assumptions that pass with that. Why has intercourse changed? What is occurring? But additionally, the nicely, anybody else is having intercourse once a week and we're having sex as soon as a month, so that we have to have a trouble. There must be something wrong with us. Speak me of my ex-girlfriends. I feel like I've barely thrown numerous of them under the bus. However, I had any other relationship. This goes again a bit further, where I much like fell in love with this woman in each other factor, non-sexual, so intellectually in every different way, after which when it got here time to have sex, which is definitely quite a bit later than it typically is in the relationships that I have, like 3 or 4 months into knowing this character, there has been, I do not know how to say this as it simply sounds, I'll just move for it, I tend to suppose, especially whilst it comes to love vaginal penetration, that it is like a hand and a glove, and the hand inside the glove failed to suit. And once more, I definitely idea that I should have spent the rest of my existence with this individual. However, I noticed that as a like insurmountable object, like my penis did not suit her vagina, and that I concept we cannot exchange. You cannot exchange the sum. Yeah, is that this something that human beings come to you about regularly? They talk approximately just like the practicalities just like the hand in the glove. Yeah, I suppose it's far, and you recognize there are, for example, like conditions that suggest that human beings can't have sex for severe motives, so like sexual dysfunctions, or you recognize specifically for women there is a circumstance known as vaginismus, which is where there is an involuntary contracting of the PC muscle tissue, the pelvic ground muscle tissues, in which they may be not able to have sex, and that we think affects approximately 1 in 500 women. In no manner am I pronouncing this is necessarily what turned into taking place here, but you realize we additionally know that it's approximately how we paintings together as couples, how we work with our bodies, what might make things extra helpful, how we will look for form of realistic advice. But it is about information, like, okay, how do we assist ourselves here as an alternative? Then once more that assumption of like something's going wrong, because it made me believe on this like concept of like there's a bodily compatibility to intercourse as nicely, not just like a desire compatibility or like, an experimentation compatibility, but there may be like a physical compatibility as well to having like good sex, wherein you can, similar to physically not be well matched. However, I think it's then wherein how do you, if you want to like explore operating around a roadblock, how do you type of do to the fact it's build yourself so hard to speak about, like I could never convey I should speak about the libido trouble with my companion, but I may want to by no means tell that partner that I wasn't, that I was basically became off by means of our loss of physical compatibility. I could by no means point out it, so I ended up to cease the relationships. I attempted multiple instances to love, repair it in numerous approaches, and that I simply could not carry myself to speak approximately it due to the fact I failed to want to hurt the individual. I failed to need to mention something that may harm them and live with them for all time, so I ended the connection at the grounds of something else, however, that changed into fundamentally the difficulty. I have truly had 2 relationships in my existence, but like sexual partners in my existence, that ended in simple terms due to that. However, yeah, and that I suppose it's so difficult again isn't always it due to the fact we simply do not know the way to manipulate, speak me approximately something, or exploring something that we just have no concept where even to begin, and that I do not offend the character, which that have to be, it ought to be a large thing inside the work which you do, like now not trying to offend your accomplice, because as you stated it's this type of sensitive subject matter, and that I do not know how I may want to have approached that state of affairs without offending the man or woman, and that I think that it's the fear of judgment, just like the worry of offending, the fear of hurting our companions, the fear of us now not being capable of go again as soon as we kind of, it feels a chunk like Pandora's box. For a few humans, like this concept of speaking about sex. In a dating, you realize, like, if I open this up, like, how do we close it? Or I assume a variety of humans have the concern of, if I open this up, then on every occasion we have sex, we are both going to be thinking about this, and we're both going to be completely in our heads. And what we understand is, whilst we're absolutely in our heads in relation to sex, we are not experiencing what is taking place in our bodies, and this is interrupting arousal. You recognize the frame's method of us form of enjoying, our frame form of operating with us, the sort of sexual arousal procedure, and so that you recognize our thoughts are as distracting as they're kind of being like a person within the room. It really is not the character carrying sex with, or a person sincerely like taking walks in, or form of announcing all of that stuff to us simply due to the fact our thoughts aren't a physically represented being does not mean they're no longer as distracting as something else, and you are completely proper due to the fact from then on. I failed to say anything, but I carried on attempting. I notion maybe you already know one terrible experience something will attempt once more, we will try once more, and it were given to the factor where I used to be. I became merely averting sex because I knew that it changed into going to be an issue, and that I started out to overthink. And as a guy, overthinking isn't always what you need to be doing when you're seeking to keep yourself. So I started out having problems maintaining my erection up due to the fact I used to be just, I was on foot and I was getting within the mattress thinking, oh my God, right here we move again, and we're given a you. Already know, like, are you going to be able to get it up? Because you without a doubt do not revel in this, and in that every one of that just became too a good deal. I couldn't tell her because I did not need to insult her, and I was starting to have problems, like, you understand, being aroused, because it was a massive problem, and you are proper. It is a snowball, and overall performance anxiety is one of the key things that I paintings with guys due to the fact where there isn't always a physical sort of indicator or cause for why they is probably suffering, for instance, with erections due to the fact entering into your head an excessive amount of, again, creates a speed bump for sexual arousal due to the fact while you're feeling careworn or you're feeling tense, you are in that form of fight, flight, unfastenation. Your frame is making ready not for you to form of lie down and have sex and be cozy and comfortable. However, it's making ready for that form of danger response, and that isn't always well matched with being sexual in that moment. So in a manner, your frame's type of running towards you, and so what you need to do then is paintings in this type of like frontal bit of your brain. You already know your mind, like specializing in that so that you can in a way like reprogram, because sex has come to be now not a laugh, interesting, pleasant, connecting. It's end up tension, scary, disturbing, frightened. You do not need to be here, could instead keep away from. So in a way, the manner I describe it loads is that means of intercourse has modified, so the manner we relate to it has changed. How does one deliver their companion good, high-quality, constructive feedback? Do you know what I mean? Like, due to the fact I'm positive there, as I was wondering then, I'm sure there is such a lot of humans taking note of this, which can be in relationships that would really like their sex to be barely specific, and that they probable in the identical way that I became irritating about coming near it with my XXXXX female friend. What's the first class way to approach those sensitive 6B8 F6984 F70 C7A C40 38 C462A 50 ECA 3 connected topics together with your associate, now not inside the second whilst you're having sex, so now not simply kind of like in bed like simply before, because additionally what you do not want to do is, you understand, kind of create like a heady scent, a further feel of like stress or tension like in that sexual space. So what I continually speak to human beings approximately is like main with a high quality. You already know, like, I really love our courting, like I'm loving what we're doing. However, perhaps there is something we are able to paintings on here, or how can we do this better, or so main with a fantastic you realize affirmation, because if someone comes at you and you understand we're regularly virtually sensitive to complaint also in our intimate relationships, and this isn't exact sufficient, or you're not doing this, or our on-the-spot reaction is protective or attacking, we are no longer open to hearing what they have to mention. We're already like shut down before they've even were given there. So form of drawing close it without that wonderful framework, or like connecting framework or open framework, and also allows paintings on this collectively, this on consideration on like how can we move approximately this, because what can also manifest is we isolate the problem in a single associate. Yeah, whilst there are two people there, I bet I Bet another type of connect to that could be simply telling them what you want as against what you do not like. So it's much like the identical outcome, however, exclusive framing. So it's like, oh, I like while you blindfold me, or I don't like while you do not blind you recognize what I mean. And simply making it, I might, some of my type of sexual partners that have given me positive remarks within the beyond have performed so by means of telling me what they prefer greater of due to the fact then we are able to lean into that, yeah, exactly, and we all like to be instructed we're doing a good activity, all of us like to be affirmed, all of us want to be in particular in intercourse due to the fact we do not have a reference point you recognize, are we doing an amazing activity, and we experience you understand if we assume we are awful at intercourse with that is in reality private, yeah, is not. It's brutal, you realize it's truly a tough thing to maintain onto, and then we go into our subsequent sexual situation thinking I'm horrific at this, and in reality what it is much more likely to do is make us warfare, and in fact while human beings are cozy and relaxed and calm, in the one situations they're capable to hook up with the other character greater, and we're sort of capable of, I assume, observe the delight path a piece greater, or kind of verify every other a piece more, and keep in mind that certainly someone says, are you able to contact me right here? It is no longer because you weren't doing it the right manner. It's simply because that is probably their desire. However, we can not be mind readers. We cannot recognize what our companions like till we talk that with them. It truly is this kind of charming factor as well that we by no means recognize. If we're suitable at intercourse, we're similar to type of trusting our, and in particular because you see these types of movies and we read those magazines about people faking orgasms as a guy, I swear to God, the primary couple of times. Someone stated that I used to be like properly in mattress or whatever, I notion you're complete of, I thought you say this to every person, and then like I nonetheless, and I have heard that a few times, something however I nevertheless do not know, and that is loopy, that like with the entirety else you have got a pretty correct gauge of whether or not you're exact at it, however, due to the fact we have in no way visible like pretty an awful lot, we have to truly, we've got by no means like seen every person doing it in actual existence, or really were given to study it outdoor of the fakeness of porn, and also you do not know how it feels for the different man or woman, and sometimes you do not even recognize if they may be faking it, or if it's actually you can't ITH properly. For me, in my mind, like type of float through lifestyles assuming you're doing K until advised otherwise, but it also assumes that right here we go again, correct, that intercourse is a formulation that you can practice across the board like anyone. It is each sexual revel in is going to be unique between the one's companions in that time, in that second, in that context. It isn't like a universally applicable true formulation. Now what we will do is we are able to, sorry, I just passed your reason, however my ex said, I was like, what we can do is we can sense greater in form, so we can make, no, I keep in mind a big part of my task to be helping humans to make knowledgeable selections about their sexual wellness and nicely being. So that is probably, you realize, thinking about the narratives that have shaped how they consider sex, thinking about their present day definition of intercourse, considering sex education. How can they sense knowledgeable about things like anatomy, things like their frame, their choices, their likes, and the communicate bit? How do I then speak that with an associate, and all of which can make contributions to higher sexual self-confidence? And once more, what we realize is like sexual self-assurance is in that man or woman. Once more, it's contemplated again to them in conditions with other people, however. Without a doubt, it's type of all about that relationship with self, and I recognize that sounds very remedy and something that all therapists say, but it's definitely true because we placed ourselves in those sexual contexts and the one's sexual conditions. For some people, they may never war with sex. They might have kind of muddled through like trial and error, worked it out type of, and always in BK, and they're satisfied, and that's exceptional. But for some people, they do conflict. For some humans, they have a period of everyday sexual functioning after which they begin to struggle, and it might be that they by no means notion approximately sex simply before until they experience like they have to. So again, there may be no type of one route to all of this, and although there are subject matters, for example, inside the conversations that I've with human beings, each person has their very own journey, their very own story, their very own reviews that have shaped that, and a number of it may begin in the playground, like playground banter about what sex is like, but at a younger age while we're pretty impressionable, and that sounds absolutely horrifying. What people are talking about, we can sort of bring that with us, and then it gives further down the road, or we have had a bad sexual enjoy early, which approach that we then do not need to strive once more, and so we maintain directly to that bad enjoy because we've had no, in a way, like challenging or corrective or diff, human beings and people, and we are changing in each manner you already know mentally, physically. I assume one of the matters that has it will be honest, because I think it is simply the point. I think when I'm honest, I think I resonate with greater humans. One of the things I'm barely involved approximately is that sooner or later in my existence I'll fall in love with any person, and the intercourse will be great and everything, and then me, all them will trade in that we ought to change in a diffusion of various methods, whether it's our desire but extra. So even like I am, we might not be drawn to every other anymore. I do realize go to pot in some form. And I wonder how a great deal of difficulty that like people converting and falling out of enchantment with every different is universal in the paintings which you do in the pit, and the human beings that you recognize come to you for therapy and for recommendation. I think it's Miles. It's not probable the most well-known thing I deal with. However, additionally, what you're basing that on is an assumption that it is now not something that may be worked, that it's not something that humans take delivery of while they are in according with each different, or that they, I assume it goes return to that relationships moving in stages and phases bit as well. And I suppose there may be, it truly is that worry of like things no longer always staying the equal, while clearly what I'd say is if we take delivery of that matters do not continually live the equal, then we can change in paintings with that and take delivery of it and enhance it or adapt. As people, we are certainly truly adaptable, but we want a sense advocated in that in preference to, I think, sort of dispose of or challenged by means of the reality that we need to in the international we live. And now there is just this extremely good like angle belief of choice, I'd say, like extra. So then my grandparents round, I imagine their relationship, their sort of circle of viable fits, prolonged to just like the length of their like avenue or village. Didn't have Tinder yet, precisely. They didn't have Tinder or Instagram. However, now in my relationships, if it is not going properly, I have got seemingly a gazillion humans proper here, which are ideal. They're all filtered, and I think 32,000 of them, just like my photo. So if I lose appeal with my accomplice in the global we stay in. Now, wherein we're given this massive form of perceived quantity of desire and accessibility, simply one swipe, it ought to make maintaining relationships collectively at instances after they hit you, recognize rocks greater hard than ever before. No, yeah, I think that there are often ideas that just like the grass is constantly greener, but similarly we remember that relationships take work, and that I think you understand we have visible a breakdown of norms we have seen, which you realize diver at an all-time high. However, it is not the same stigma that it used to be, that sort of humans changing their models of relationships, so converting relationships isn't sort of this sort of a big aspect. However, also something I think is important to mention is just because a relationship has ended would not suggest that during itself it wasn't a success, and that I assume this is another factor that we want to reframe. You realize people can be in a relationship for 10 years and it ends. That does not imply that courting failed or become a failure. It'd have been for that individual at that time. This is a part of the problem, in my opinion, with marriage, due to the fact marriage, you say, until loss of life do us element, but we all recognize that if there is the most effective steadiest trade, we are all going to change. So how will you truly make a dedication that you are going to live with this person? Why could you want to till demise, knowing that you're both going to alternate in numerous ways that are yet to be visible? However, cannot you also trade collectively in an effective way? You could, like, I suppose human beings are shifting. They are able to circulate, in case you think about it as like parallel traces. They can go, they could be barely tilted 1 degree to the proper. This means that in 10 years' time they will be too far aside, or they can be slight 1 degree to the left. This means that during 10 years' time they'll be closer collectively, or they may be perfectly directly proper, so perfectly parallel, which means that during 10 years' time they'll be the same. They'll resonate in the same way. They may be as close. You recognize whatever, but you don't know that. But so I suppose that it really is why I've usually been barely allowed down by using the idea of marriage, due to the fact I think you recognize you cannot predict the future. So why would you need to make something like that so very last, and I assume like the Men in Black, have you ever visible guys in black? Oh, got a long term ago whilst they get the pen and they maintain it up, and in the event that they press the button at the pen, basically it raises your memory. I from time to time suppose I think if we held that pen up to the world and erased everyone's reminiscence, what are the things that might come back, like technological know-how? Would come lower back, faith could in no way come returned, the same we. Would not, it wouldn't come again, the same proper science, we'd determine all the equal things out, same experiments. Marriage I am like no, would not come return the equal, no longer in 2021, I do not think that might come lower back the equal. I suppose we would have a much more bespoke, open bendy form of marriage that might contain much less of the regulation and might involve much less of the church, and that I in all likelihood suppose would be a little bit greater powerful. So I guess my question is, ready marriage, what do you reflect on consideration on marriage? Are you married? I assume that it's what does it provide human beings? You already know, like, what are human beings looking for? And I think for a whole lot of human beings, it is safety, you realize, and it's its shape of lack of confidence, though, like, I think I tend to, I'm going to play Satan's recommend here. Yeah, I do to the fact I assume in case you're seeking out protection from like a prison agreement, I'm like, then that for me speaks to a touch bit of insecurity someplace else. However, I suppose it's also approximately, I assume marriage has been the norm proper historically. It's continually been the norm. It is always been also taken into consideration the gold popular, or like what we ought to kind of aspire to be or goal for, and that I suppose that once more, that effect of history, like us doing the things that we've got continually executed, but it's an organization and quite a few people join that. Now what we see now is that humans can be married multiple times and be happy in each relationship, or it'd be ideal for that degree or for them, or for that courting, that human beings don't need to get married, that humans can figure and emerge as dad and mom without being married, that it's, I suppose, the most important representation of commitment that traditionally we've continually had, and people now can discover different methods to decide to each different, you already know, buying property together that doesn't require it. So I suppose kids, it's probably the most important commitment. However, it's also about what those human beings are searching out. I think that as you realize human beings assume I am surely towards marriage, it is definitely no longer the reality, and my buddies say, to me, are Steve's against marriage. I've listened to his podcast. I'm like, no, you didn't concentrate. What I am against, what I'm for, is a greater bespoke, tailor-made method to how two human beings come together. I surely had a friend of mine say to me this week that he's going to be taking note of this podcast for positive. He said, he thinks he can best be with a person for a year at a time. He says after a year, I do not assume I will, the relationship cannot cross on. So he's having those continual 12 months relationships and appearance. I bet the maximum essential macro question is like, are you satisfied? Yeah, and people's happiness is derived in diverse approaches. I do think marriage is truly, you understand, I suppose perhaps it's because I tend to have an angle that conference traditional solutions aren't constantly very well prepared to resolve new issues in the world we are living in is a very new one. We are living longer than ever before. We're uncovered to differ, have plenty greater freedoms than I think a few of our ancestors used to have. So maybe the manner that people commit to each other have to no longer contain the regulation. It should not take years to divorce someone, which I suppose is loopy. I assume it doesn't should, and that I suppose it is about what human beings are seeking out. And I assume, as you're asking in advance, approximately like multi-companion relationships, or like you recognize consensual non-monogamy. It's approximately us making knowledgeable picks, approximately what works for us and our relationships, and that I suggest it is a verbal exchange I was having with a person simply the previous day is, how can we sense more knowledgeable, the way do we discover what that may look like in any other manner, due to the fact for a few human beings looking to healthy into what they feel they are anticipated to do might not work for them. It's a system or a version that doesn't work. So how do we then begin to open up that communique for ourselves? However, additionally, we have our fears. We're humans. We adore to, I assume, experience that we fit the everyday healthy, what is predicted, or you understand a number of us do, at least, that what properly different human beings think about me if I step out of doors, that in order people weave that stability of what do I need? However, additionally, what will different humans think? Yeah, which I suppose is commonly quite awful. Yeah, but isn't it one of the largest matters that drives people in loads of approaches, drives them strive somewhere? Although I think I simply suppose in each side of existence it's like your mother wishes you to be a health practitioner, but you really want to be a ballet dancer in Costa Rica, and it is like you recognize what's anticipated of you. You understand you're anticipated to move, get married, and then become a medical doctor, but like your intrinsic pleasure will come from going and being a ballet dancer in Costa Rica and now not getting married or whatever, and smoking. I do not know, something within the mountains over there, but I generally tend to consider, and this might be, there's no I don't have a large scientific basis for this. I have a couple of philosophical research I have read, but that individuals who abandon their genuine selves or that comply with society's expectancies usually have a few factor of their life, a few type of moment of attention in which they realize that they have got no longer now not fulfilled themselves as they could have. Isn't always this lower back to that factor of expectation as opposed to fact, though. Yeah, I guess so. Just like the gap between what we anticipate and then wherein we type of find ourselves to be, or what that looks as if, because I assume again it's that, and additionally, it is that idea again I experience like I talk. Proximately, gaps alow. I type of understand myself to be in the man or woman I show everybody else that I'm in the larger, that whole, the more area for struggles or battles or intellectual health demanding situations around that what's, and this might simply be the identify of this video due to the fact because I suppose it is going to be, so we'll clickbait this part. What is the unmarried largest killer of relationships inside the modern day age in 2021 in your view, in case you had to mention this? One component is the largest killer of relationships. What wouldn't it be? Unrealistic expectations. One of the huge troubles, you mentioned it earlier, this idea of what we see in the film. So we're oh, that is what it is. So then when it's now not like that, we're disenchanted. Our companion fails us. They haven't met our expectations. They have not met all of our desires. We communicate approximately this concept. Masses of relationship experts speak about this idea of ways we should not assume one character, our associate, to meet every single one of our needs. However, we do, and so they are a form of doomed to fail. Then in that way, so how can we trade that? How do we start to kind of open that up? How do we, you already know we've different relationships in our lives. We've got circle of relatives, we've got friends, we've colleagues. We need to begin to think about how we can do that for ourselves, after which we work with our partners to create something collectively. I absolutely resonate with that, and I suppose maximum of my relationships fail because the expectancy that my companion has on me, it is going unmet, because I am very egocentric and I really like to paint things all the time and to consider my stuff all of the time, and I'm very self-absorbed, and while I've unfastened time, I just want to I don't know, do something for me. I have tried over the years to love manage that expectation with the aid of making it clear as early as I in all likelihood can that paintings is a massive a part of my life, and I am very selfish. Selfish feels like this type of negative phrase, but it way that I am so fed on with my passions and the things, yeah, you could say centered. I take advantage of selfish as it makes it due to the fact I am looking to take a little bit of blame, I bet. But I'm so consumed with my passions, I will work all day, after which I'll go on YouTube and need to observe something, approximately SpaceX and Elon Musk taking spaceships to Mars, after which inside the morning you already know I just want to do, and that I type of need them to do their personal factor as well. So I try and very early on lay that expectation down. However, it just never appears to paintings, because at the begin someone will inform you that they're cool with that. They're by no means cool with that ever. I think it is approximately that you recognize relationships are about that stability of independence and dependence, and so it is wherein that stability sits. I want independence. I want them to be unbiased, me to be impartial, and could meet in the center occasionally. However, yeah, I don't know, perhaps maybe I am the problem, because I suppose that compromise is essential. I do not suppose I compromise very frequently. As a good deal as I must, I went via my existence. I assume pretending that I was in order, that targeted on my work and no one could address it, but I in all likelihood suppose that I am additionally I assume selfish might be the phrase, and unwilling to compromise, and I assume so just the negative model of selfish is likewise the word wherein I prioritize my needs greater than someone else's. I suppose that is brought on me a whole lot of problems. I take a seat with people on this podcast all the time. It truly is first-rate successful, and they in large part war in relationships. Do you observe it's due to the fact their number one dating then is with their paintings, yeah, and themselves as It meets you understand we see that right we need humans speak approximately their organizations as their toddlers you understand like it really is my first infant or it is my infant and I think that or we for some humans we get our desires met through our companies, through our passions via our recreation via our careers and for some people they could get enough of their needs for relationships met in the ones form of smaller doses or now not in those kind of like unmarried intimate or couple or relational relationships, but they have that met in other approaches across the board or in type of smaller methods now. Who are we to pathologize that? I think hard. I was hoping you'd have all the solutions. I'm sorry I actually don't have all of the answers. I'm able to but compromise. Is essential proper? Yeah, however, in any courting, you compromise with people you work with, you compromise with pals, you compromise with circle of relatives, members like we all of us ought to compromise due to the fact relationships are but many people there are, but if we are talking about couples, two folks that are impartial special people seeking to paint things collectively and they're now not going to perfectly fit collectively or be aligned in every single way, so how will we navigate that whilst you're jogging your very own business, though, and you're the CEO? You don't need to compromise as tons. Do you understand what I suggest? Matters generally tend to move on your timetable while you understand you get to kind of lay down so to your and then transitioning into your private life you have to nearly perform the opposite conduct. That is like excessive endurance listening while you're the CEO. You realize condense matters how you want and you're leaning going at your cadence inside you're the way you want things to appear, whereas in your private life that it is maybe wherein I have struggled while I have found out one conduct in my professional lifestyles which is set saving time on the whole lot and optimizing everything to be extra efficient and overall performance based. Yeah, and I'm like I don't need any sentence to be longer than find it irresistible needs to be so then transitioning into my personal existence wherein matters. You may shall we go for a stroll at a wall like I am like what are you doing, what a waste of time, what for like do you recognize what I suggest? And I suppose I have struggled with that transition because the selection making framework I have, whether that I use it paintings it cannot be the equal it is relevant. Oh my God, it's the worst and every now and then perhaps it seeps over into my non-public lifestyles so they're specific. It's nearly like one of a kind running systems precisely exactly exceptional targets. Do you watch that? So if I like type of push that return directly to that type of query of like how relationships work back directly to then you definitely do you observe that entrepreneurs or those who then form of exit on their very own and do that are more susceptible to that special way of referring to or extra? It really is their greater natural style as in do I assume they are more likely to say so simply to ensure in terms of you have been saying like you understand as a CEO you are like the man or woman in fee you set the schedule you place the time like it's greater you are kind of main that during a way that might be a bit of being an entrepreneur is someone who type of puts their head down and does that. Yeah, however, and it's also like heavily learned it is such as you analyze consider in case you placed I don't know they say like you know how diamonds are made that it is just like the stress over 1,000,000 years or something. You get compelled over 10 years and you study a philosophy on your use of time for the way you need things to appear anything. And that becomes part of your person, although it wasn't while you have been, you recognized 10 years before whilst going via that enjoy it makes it a part of your individual where you are like quite impatient matters you already know generally perform within the manner you need them to so that you learn that personal philosophy do to the fact that's what made you successful and additionally that is what's required to succeed. Yeah, and that I definitely suppose that it's for me besides I imply of direction I've were given those loopy hindsight biases, but that is what was required for me to get to wherein I needed to get to. But if I want to achieve success in my relationships then it is like some of these different matters that is like compromise and patience and doing matters for the sake of doing them in place of where they're going to get you with a few form of final results. It is what I've struggled with anyway. Anyway, enough about me. You already know a lot of stuff. Proper questionable. Yeah, you've got discovered a lot of stuff. So how smooth did you locate it to put into effect all of this stuff which you recognize into your very own existence? And for your personal relationships, I constantly, every time I've like an expert in a precise topic on I am continually curious about their personal capability to apply their know-how in their personal lives. I imply I assume you already know speak me for myself in this space like I suppose I can be a hypocrite. I assume we will all be hypocrites in our personal methods and it truly is due to the fact we're additionally all human. You recognize we all still have our triggers, our anxieties, our defenses, and I strive my best and that I assume that you recognize it. Is the exceptional you can do, but I suppose that relationships, there's an acknowledgement that relationships take paintings and take nurture, and that I think absolutely whilst you strive to speak approximately this stuff all the time, you truly sometimes need to kind of step again and be like, okay, so what am I doing right here? Like at home, how do I implement this as a partner, as a determined, as a family member, as a chum? And it is type of acknowledging that I am being thoughtful of it, and I think that there may be additionally that idea of like, how am I satisfactory working with or serving human beings near me, rather than kind of like the whole lot else, something else to do for me. It's about pulling away. I assume from being a yes man, you recognize there was a level in my type of life career, and I stated yes to definitely everything, and now you have to be a bit more selective due to the fact in any other case, then you definitely lose the fine time, and I suppose that first-rate time is a critical element, and it's truly making sure that it is carved out, protected. So I think for me, it really is a large part of it. But yeah, I assume no longer you already know what is the perfect courting. We're all working at the entirety all of the time, and that I don't fake because I am a person that works with relationships and intercourse. I have not to be running on it myself. I wager all of your pals come to you. So remaining nighttime, you like, did you get that loads? I assume a piece. However, I assume I experience particularly fortunate that I have a completely, emotionally open, emotionally sensible organization of buddies. You understand, like I surround myself with the human beings in which we have the ones open conversations we are capable of, go to just like the tough places. It's miles, very mutually supportive, and none of us pretend to have it all worked out or that it is all perfect. You recognize, I assume there's sort of a nearly like a party of just like the flawlessly imperfectness, of all of it, and also putting our palms up like, wow, this week is tough, or I am sincerely struggling with this, or you already know this is going on, and that I think that there may be something in knowing you can choose up the telephone and simply say that this is highly, hugely critical. Do you ever teach or endorse any of your patients to, this is a rogue question, but I simply got here to my thoughts to head and get some form of like training. Sexual training is that an element I have visible it in like a documentary. I think it is quite like a place in Amsterdam you can go and I'll train you. How do you already know supply someone a hand activity or something I do not know? No, I assume you understand. I suppose the where we are at now you recognize in the global is that there are online platforms kind of creating, I assume, like greater instructional content. So there is an first-rate one which was released by the Kinsey Institute, which is one of the leading type of sexuality studies institutes within the international, and it's a platform called OMS, and it's essentially about assisting like academic videos and interviews approximately like the way to create woman orgasm or stimulate woman pride. What is the website again? But I think which you recognize where now you recognize with sexual well-being and well-being becoming this sort of large essential subject matter, we're in view that those platforms are developing which are to help educate or to assist, offer recommendation, and meaning that the educational content is available to people. And I advocate lots of that stuff because if humans feel informed, they experience extra assured, and that means that they can have actionable matters to paintings directly to build on, and that they're greater able to be like, okay, yeah, I understand how this works now, whether or not that is our bodies or someone else's bodies to a certain extent, so which can form of assist set me up for a sexual experience. And lastly, just to kind of loop round from the begin, what are the, in case you had been to say that they had been, there had been similarities in couples that do enjoy tremendous sexual relationship, just ideas, pinnacle line principles. What are those sort of key distilled pinnacle line standards? One of these big query verbal exchange, yeah, is like pinnacle of the tree, and that I suppose it is top of the tree, and that I assume it is the one that human beings do not want to pay attention because it's much less actionable and it's pretty scary. Yeah, exactly. It is like in a manner, I suppose, talking approximately, it's far the toughest component to do, but it's miles, any relationship kind of expert, any expert within the sexual kind of nicely being how area will say to you like communication is that after, which it is L. Try this, and we communicate about those communication sports things like kind of speak me from your own role. So like I say, so there may be a place referred to as the Gottman Institute, and they have, you already know, achieved so much research on couples. However, it is this ownership, like my feelings are, I'm feeling my angle is due to the fact truly what you're no longer announcing on your partner is you. Yeah, it's not blame. It is now not blame exactly. So I think that the conversation element on like tremendous conversation is a part of that. However, it's that breakaway from assumption. It is like explanation or assumption. Assumption is what trips us up so much of the time due to the fact we are thoughts reading. We suppose we understand what our companion's going to say earlier than they say it, so we do not even give them a risk. Yeah, that is authentic. Nicely concentrate. Thanks so much for your time. I experienced it is been a totally enlightening communication, and I respect that the reality which you've taken the burden of all of my each sexually show I've ever had. It's good to get it out of that. I sense like this turned into therapy for me more than whatever else, but where can human beings find you? And I recognize you are worried in a group of different tasks. I recognize which you were given a sex toy undertaking which you're worried in as well. So in which can human beings find you and reach you? Yes, so my internet site is my call. Kate Moylicom at UK. I host a podcast referred to as the Sexual Wellness Sessions, in which we've got informative but informal conversations about different areas of sexual properly being. So whether this is desire, sexual functioning, sort of sexual mindset, infertility and intercourse, I attempt to cowl kind of particular topics around like what humans might be struggling with. And then I'm on Instagram at Kate Moyle Therapy, but this Expo Challenge is on the United Kingdom sex professional for Lilo, so luxury sex play emblem, and that they do a few first-rate products as nicely. So, and I work with manufacturers type of creating like sexual type of well-being focused, I suppose, projects or huge merchandise. Yeah, and that I suppose manufacturers are sincerely seeking to get it proper, and I clearly recognize that. I assume it's tremendous, so I clearly love that work, as it feels like it's taking the gaining knowledge of from in the therapy room and putting it out into the international, and hopefully then this is creating that social cultural sort of intercourse high quality shift that I think all of us want. Nicely. Thank you a lot for approaching these days. It's an actual pleasure to talk to you, and I used to be, so I've been so excited about this conversation for a long time, in all likelihood due to the fact I have been able to sell off by myself private issues, but because you're someone that absolutely has a effective eye you assert is taboo and often not mentioned enough, and it is why I notion that changed into true to have. This is one of the pages on this podcast diary, so thanks so much, and I am sure we're going to, I'll be in touch with all my different problems. Every 12 months I will be in touch. Simply desired to say thank you. Thanks, that is massive information I sooner or later were given to satisfy my debut book, Glad Horny Millionaire. It arrived from my writer last week, and it become so surreal seeing this book after about almost 3 years from the point in which we had the concept and I began speak me to publishers approximately it to the factor wherein it is in my palms has been almost 3 years, and that I traveled the arena to produce this ebook. I stayed in 2 distinct jungles on distinctive opposite sides of the arena for 60 days in overall, completely alone, absolutely in isolation. To put in writing this ebook, I've poured a lot time, attempt, studies, analyzing into it. I've met intellectual health specialists. I've met a number of the most successful human beings in the international. I have met clinical psychologists, professors, human beings which are specialists on divorce, the whole thing, and I have poured all into this ebook, jumbled together with my personal life stories. It is, without a shadow of a doubt, the unmarried most important factor I have ever produced, and it is loopy due to the fact you need to promote a ebook. That is what like fuels the industry proper. That's what offers you a publisher. That's what gets into shops. That is what offers you distribution. But if I ought to click my finger and all people were given it without spending a dime, and it intended that I made zero, I'd click my finger in a heartbeat due to the fact I think it is that essential, and I just want people to read it. I do not care approximately the cash aspect of it. It is everything I have ever learned, all of my most crucial lessons distilled into this small ebook, and I teamed up with one of the international's leading artists in type of visualizations, and he produced approximately 25 photos for the ebook as properly. So I realized that a few human beings study through words, a few people examine through photographs. The book is an aggregate of the 2 satisfied horny millionaire. You can pre-order it anywhere now, and in case you do get that pre-order, please do DM me due to the fact I might like to thanks myself music.